Mənə elə gəlir ki, artıq rəqəmsal iqtisadiyyatla bağlı kifayət qədər danışıldı və qarşımızda duran çətinliklər, görülmüş işlər artıq həm qeyd olundu. Ona görə çox da bu barədə danışmadan istəyirəm birbaşa biz panel diskussiyalarımıza keçək. Bildiyiniz kimi, rəqəmsal iqtisadiyyat ümumiyyətlə 4-cü sənaye inqilabı avtomatlaşdırma və qarşılıqlı əlaqə ilə təcəssüm olunur və burada da kompüterlərin rolu həddən artıq böyükdür. Yəni, həm texnologiyaların, amma texnologiyaların inkişafı da kompüter texnologiyaları ilə çox bağlıdır. Ona görə birinci sözü bugün tədbirimizə qoşulan Orta Doğu Texniki Universitetinin professoru, Türkiyədə ilk Human-Computer Interaction, yəni insanla kompüter əlaqəsinin barəsində və laboratoriyasının təsisçisi Professor Doktor Kürşat Çağıltay iştirak edir və sözü ona vermək istəyirəm. O, rəqəmsal iqtisadiyyatda insan-kompüter qarşılıqlı əlaqəsi mövzusunda məruzəsini təqdim edəcək. Buyurun, Kürşat bəy, söz sizin. Buyurun.
Okay, everybody, my presentation will be in English. First of all, dear distinguished government officers and President of the Azerbaycan State University of Economics and dear university representatives and academicians and distinguished participants. Welcome to this session. Actually, it is a great honor for me to speak on this great conference, and I appreciate your invitation. Kardeş Azerbaycan'a Türkiye'den de selamlar getirdim. Teşekkürler. Okay, my presentation is about human-computer interaction in digital economy. Actually, in the first session, the speakers actually talk about the human aspect of technology. I mean, everything we have been doing is actually for human beings. Digital economy, all the technologies, we have been using those or developing those technologies for human beings. So, but do we really develop those technologies, information technologies appropriately? And are there some problems? So that's my talk. Okay, let me. Okay, so computers in everywhere, especially with the revolution of computers in 1980s, they started to become a part of our daily life. And right after the around 1990s, we also have experience with the internet. Internet was a part of our life, I mean, have been a part of our life. And as a result of this, it's also caused the development in digital economy. And according to recent numbers, the global GDP is about 16% of global GDP is actually based on digital economy. So we have been investing a lot to computers and digital technologies. But the question is, does this investment really make enough impact? And this question actually was first asked by the Bob Solow. He's the economy Nobel Prize winner. And he says that you can see the computer age everywhere, but in the productivity statistics. I mean, we have been spending a lot of money, I mean, millions of dollars or billions of dollars for computers. But do we really get enough productivity from this investment? And later in 1990s, in the mid 1990s, a paper was published in MIT. And in this paper, they started to talk about productivity paradox, a new term. So as you see in the graph on the upper right part of the screen, that graph shows how much we invest for technologies. I mean, we spend millions, billions of dollars for technologies. But the other graph on the below shows the productivity. I mean, we spend a lot of money for information technologies, but we don't get same amount of productivity from this investment. So this was called as productivity paradox. It was in around 1990s. But later, the same issue was raised by Kemal Dervish and Ziya Qureshi. Most probably you're familiar with Kemal Dervish. He was one of the economy ministers of Turkey, and he worked for World Bank. And they also mentioned about this. I mean, we spend a lot of money for technology, but we don't have same amount of productivity. And in recent times, in 2020, and another paper was published at MIT, and the same issue, productivity paradox, was raised. We still spend a lot of money, millions, billions of dollars, and we don't get enough productivity from this investment. Why? What's the reason? I mean, there are several explanations, or at least attempts to explain this problem. I mean, somebody says we have problems to measure. Somebody says there are some economical problems, but there is another explanation, which is about usefulness, usability, and the productivity. And the famous author Tom Launder, he published a book, and the book was published by MIT Press, The Trouble with Computers. According to those researchers, they say the major problem of this productivity paradox actually comes from the design of systems, because those systems are designed by some technical people, but the end users are actually ordinary citizens. So since these technical decisions and the ordinary citizens' abilities do not match, we don't get enough productivity from those information technologies. If we look at the numbers, recent numbers, I mean, on e-commerce, in total in US and EU, e-commerce sales are about $738 billion US. But other analysis shows that actually we are missing about 32% of the potential of e-commerce. Just because of the usability problems or design issues of those systems. We also call it as UX or user experience problems. So just because of the problematic design of the systems, information system designs, every year we lost about $260 billion. Why? What's the reason? Actually, it's about majority of the reason actually because of the usefulness and usability. Poor design of software. As I told you, the software information systems are mainly designed by technical people, but those designs actually do not match the needs of the ordinary citizens. Automations occurred. I mean, we have ATM machines, we have computers in everywhere, in health system, in defense system, in education. Computers in everywhere, but we don't have augmentation. We couldn't successfully bring the technology into the life, ordinary life of the people. So what's the solution? The people who work in human-computer interaction area or user experience area, we say that user-centered system design is the solution. Why? I will come to that point in a minute. Why user-centered design? In the past, I mean, especially before 1980s, computers were just located in some centers. And those computers were used by some highly educated, very selective people. Only a group of people were using computers. But today, computers are in everywhere. And computers are for everybody, okay? Even, I mean, the kids around 1 or 2 years old, they are the users of computers, and very old people can use it. I mean, all the citizens are actually users. So not only some selected people. And users, I mean, designers or technical people, computer engineers or other technical people, they design the systems, but users don't understand their intention, okay? So like in this traffic sign, I mean, the designer may think, okay, this traffic sign is so obvious. However, the end users may not understand. They have difficulties. So those difficulties cause some problems on the user side. And if the technical design and the user experience design do not overlap, this is going to cause productivity problems, because technical design does not match the needs of the end users, and the users, end users, do not have the abilities, or they have difficulties to use those systems. So this overlap has to be very high. Let me give you an example, a specific example. I'm sure you are familiar with the famous e-commerce site, Amazon.com. I mean, it's one of the biggest one. So in the design of their shopping website, just because of the design of a single button, the Amazon was losing about $300 million per year, just because of a simple design of the interface. How? Let me explain. Let me try to explain. I mean, you decided to buy something from Amazon.com, you pick the product, and you put it in your shopping cart. So you decided to go the checkout. In the previous design, when you decide to go to checkout, the system was forcing you to sign up or sign into the system. And then it allows you to make the purchase. But later, when they analyze the design of the system, they realize that many people actually give up from making the shopping right at the sign up or sign in stage. So they decided to make some revisions on this design. So instead of putting the sign up button previous to making the purchase, they moved to the end of the purchase. So right after this one, they calculated that they made more shopping on their website. So every year they started to make $300 million more shopping from their website. So technically everything was okay. I mean, the designers, technical software designers, they designed the system, something like that, but it was not actually matching the needs of the end users. So just a simple design, this design problem actually caused a lot of problems. So then they started to make more and more money. I'm sure you use ATM machines, I mean, to get money from those machines. And you have cards, you have banking card. Next time when you go to your ATM machine, please check it out. Does the machine give the money first and the card, or does the machine give the card or the money? The previous earlier design of ATM machines was using the first option. The machines were giving the money first and then the card. So people were forgetting their cards in the machine. They take the money and then they leave the ATM machine. The result actually around $5 million loss for banks, just because of this simple design idea or design mistake. So recent or new ATM machines, now they changed the order. So now the machines are actually giving the card and then the money. So as I told you, next time when you go to your ATM machine, please check it, whether they fix this problem or not. Let me give you another example from Azerbaijan. As far as I know, you have been using those kind of terminal machines, those machines for making payments, etc. So millions of people in Azerbaijan, use this kind of machines all around the country. Again, next time when you decide to use this machine, look at the process. Is there any problem with the process? Do you lose some time while using this machine? If there's a design problem and if every user lose about 1 minute, if they spend extra 1 minute, and if 1 million transactions are done with this machine, this means 1 million minutes are lost while using this machine. Okay, so if there are some design problems, and as far as I know, I mean, from our human-computer interaction classes with our Azerbaijani friends, there were some design problems with these machines, and those issues actually are not only limited with e-commerce sites. It's all those problems are in everywhere. This example from one of our projects in Turkey, Aselsan is one of the biggest defense company. They are developing defense software. And this representation, actually, this screen is from Turkish Air Defense Command Control System. So this is a very mission critical system. If there is an attack to Turkey, air attack to Turkey, this system detects the attack and takes the counter action. The system is perfect. The system was designed by engineers. However, this system is not used by engineers. This system is used by ordinary soldiers, low education, and not very skilled. They are not experts in computers, so they had difficulties. So this is a mission critical system. If there's an attack, then they have to respond in a minute or in seconds. So then we work with those end users. We made some improvements on this very complex interface, and we try to solve some of the problems. It's not in the defense industry. The design problems are also in medical systems. For example, this is a very classical case from medical system design. Terak 25 was designed to treat cancer patients. In order to kill the cancer cells, this machine was giving some beams to the body. But because of the design issues, software design issue, the machine was giving massive overdoses, and it killed 5 people and several people were injured. Why? Technical design, UX design problems, because the technical decisions did not match the technicians' decisions. So that was a big problem. So especially on the digital economy, human-computer interaction and the principles are very important. According to several reports, 70% of projects fail due to inability to either attract or retain users. Remember the case from Amazon.com. If there's a problem, people giving up from shopping from the site. And another study from 480 companies, it says, if the company makes investment to user-centered design, their sales actually increase about 75%. And UX designers reduce the time to fix the problems. I mean, if the UX designer involves into the project, if they solve the usability problems, then this will make a huge contribution to the companies. And for every dollar invested to usability issues or user experience design, a company can expect about $100 in return. So those numbers actually shows that one of the reasons for this productivity paradox in digital economy comes from the design issues of those systems, from the human-computer interaction issues. So conclusion, my final slide, information technology is at the heart of digital economy. And everything is designed for humans. And if you want to design systems for humans, human-centered system design is the key for a successful digital economy. and we have to design systems not from the technical point of view. We have to design those systems, information systems, from the human's point of view. We have to take their needs into our consideration. We have to put the human being into the center, and we have to design the system around their needs, their limitations, their abilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kürşat. It was very interesting to hear about the productivity paradox and reasons behind it. Since you have actually at the end of your speech touched the issues related to the importance of the user-friendly and user-centered approach, I want to give the floor to our next speaker here, who is dealing actually with the issues of the digital societies, and Ms. Marjorie Buchter, and I hope that I am pronouncing it right. Ms. Buchter leads the Digital Society Initiative at Chatham House, and this initiative aims to maximize the potential of technological developments through solution-driven policy recommendations. And today, Ms. Marjorie Buchter will present us some of their research and recommendations regarding how to shape the direction and implementation of the digital transformation. Please, Ms. Buchter, the floor is yours. And she's joining us online, by the way. Please.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Could you hear me well on your side? Yes, I see you all nodding. Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, member of the audience, fellow panelists. It's a pleasure to be with you today, at least virtually. I'm dialing in from sunny London. It's probably not as sunny as Azerbaijan today, but it's quite decent on a UK basis. I also want to thank the Azerbaijan State University of Economics for their gracious invitation today. So as our moderator mentioned, I lead Chatham House Digital Society Initiative. And for those of you who are not familiar with Chatham House, it's an international affair think tank based in London. My particular program essentially looks at what we call technology governance and how do you actually manage emerging technology from a policy side. And my mandate is essentially to provide evidence-based recommendations to policymakers, but also tech sector, for a more efficient and inclusive way of regulating the technology associated with the industrial transformation from digital platform to artificial intelligence. And so what I would like to speak about today is essentially present to you some of our research and recommendation regarding how government and citizen can shape the direction and the implementation of the digital transformation for the benefits of society as a whole. And especially how this may look like for a country like Azerbaijan. So I think, and that's what also my fellow panelists mentioned in the speech, technology today is really inseparable from practically all the dimension of a public policy. And of course, digital transformation speak directly to the notion of economic growth and prosperity, but it also directly disrupts society as it affects competition, job, livelihood, inequality, efficiency and resource efficiency and security. And if you consider the latest debate in the space, essentially the conversation around the next generation of the digital environment, like the metaverse or immersive environment, it really speaks to or sort of becomes a question about the nature of human interactions and human agency. So this is not only a technology or economic discussion, it's also very much a political and a social one. And so it shouldn't be digitalization at all cost. And it should not only be technology design, but it should also be human design. So in this context, my role with Chatham House is essentially to answer the following question. So what are the policy tools and mechanisms to build a digital infrastructure that deliver values for society as a whole? And I think what is particularly interesting in the space is that we have witnessed a really strong shift in how we answered this question collectively. And if you look at the early 2000s, essentially the answer was like, there should be no intervention. The policymakers should not be involved in governing digital technology, and industry should be left alone to innovate freely. Now, moving forward 20 years later, the narrative has changed completely, and there's a recognition for the need of regulation and sort of course correct or mitigate some of the negative impacts of the digital transformation. That being said, I think it's fair to indicate that it's a relatively new field of study, and policy making has not always been very aligned with the very fast pace of emerging technology. And I think there's a lag here, but there are, however, kind of interesting lessons learned already from different part of the policy spectrum. But I think that it's still very much a key challenges for many countries, and many countries are actually in the process of developing the digital infrastructure and the policy related to it. And I think that many of those countries are facing a really real challenge of trying to make informed decision on the strategies, on the system and providers, and on the policy they need to adopt in a way that sort of help economic growth, but also sit well with their sort of social and security priorities. And so I think that the idea is that they shouldn't simply import ideas or technology from the East or from the West, but try to really provide to the citizen in the country a digital transformation that is specific to their needs. And so I believe one core issue in this space is essentially that and that's also a source of geopolitical tension at this point, is that a lot of the technology provider and technology companies today, big tech, essentially come from a handful of countries. And the issue for a nation like Azerbaijan, but not only also for European member state, it's a similar question of how do you keep some technical and digital sovereignty, and sort of how do you promote national leadership and strategic autonomy with the digital transformation. And I think this new notion of digital sovereignty has emerged because there are strong concern raised about the economic and social influence of foreign technology company, and that especially in three main areas. The first one is the notion of citizen control over the personal data, how data is collected, how data is hosted, and under which term. The second aspect is the constraint or the issue that foreign company brings on the growth of national technology champions. Because in the digital economy, there is a winner stake or sort of the largest platform win because the sheer scale of their impact. And I think finally, there is this question of the ability for national decision maker to enforce their law and citizen to have their sort of own culture and sensitivities in the digital space. So essentially, in this context, the concept of digital sovereignty refers to a country's ability to act independently in the digital world. And I think that's a concept, to be very transparent, that has been pushed initially by the European Union, but that is nonetheless relevant, I think, for a lot of other countries that are, as I say, developing their digital infrastructure. And it's really key question around personal data and how it's managed. How do you support local industry and technology champion? And how do you keep regulatory and cultural autonomy over your digital space? Now, it's many challenges, but I believe there are good news in the space over the last couple of years. And we've seen an evolution and maturation of this discussion with some, I guess, good example. And they are in developed and developing countries, a series of initiatives or best practices that I would encourage you to consider and potentially useful partners or example for Azerbaijan. The first one, I guess, it's that at the international level, and there is a growing effort and recognition that there should be more digital capacity building, and that digital capacity building should be tailored to national circumstances. And sort of the UN has now published a roadmap for digital cooperation. And there's a clear highlight that it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all type of transformation, but really tailor the approach to a political, economic, and social context. And I think one good idea here that I would actually like to mention in this discussion is the notion of regional or sub-regional bodies for digital transformation, because I guess Azerbaijan is not isolated in this transformation, and there are sort of neighbors and partners that should be considered, and there's obviously a lot of effort at the international level to help a regional discussion around the regional transformation. So that's my first point. The second one that could be, I believe, also an interesting example is some of the new legislation that have just been approved in the European Union, which is the Digital Services Act and the Digital Market Act. And so the Brussels effect is actually quite interesting, and it's a well-known phenomenon of the EU being really driving this process of technology governance internationally, because creating sort of the first rules around the digital environment. Now, I'm not saying that's the gold standard. I'm not saying that this will be the best regulation coming forward. And by no means, I'm not advocating Azerbaijan to take over the EU regulation. What I would like to highlight, however, is that there are ideas and concepts in the Digital Services Act and the Digital Market Act that are quite interesting and I think helpful when it comes to managing and sort of governing the digital space. The first concept that I think is worth highlighting is the notion of digital gatekeepers. And sort of it's identifying the big tech companies that, as I say, have a first mover or winner's take or advantage, and for those platforms have stronger regulation and requirements that they need to align with the national needs, etc. But also, so those requirements, there's a layer of requirements that are stronger for those type of gatekeepers, but not so much so for SMEs or startups. So it's really the idea of leveling the playing ground and allowing small players, national players, to grow more exponentially. So that's the one idea that is interesting. The second one is, I think a lot of the European legislation look at a co-regulatory model. So basically, it's not only the policymakers that define those regulations, it's also done in cooperation with the private sector. And so policymakers set up a series of rules that are more framework and sort of represent the European values, but ultimately the nitty-gritty and the detail of the application of legislation are up to the private sector, and the technical answer is from the private sector. And I think that these type of legislation are actually meant to be a stronger feedback loop between the public sector and the private sector to make sure that they're still agile and quite responsive to the very fast-moving nature of digital technologies. So basically, that's in a nutshell my overview of the space. And as I say, to consider the digital transformation not as an isolated nation, but I think there are a lot of best practice there that could be considered, and also the potential role of Azerbaijan in driving the digital transformation in the country, but also in its region. So that's it on my end. Again, thank you for your time and your interest. It has been a pleasure to present today. I'm really looking forward to my fellow panelist presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Pusher. You talked about, reminded us basically about importance of digital sovereignty. You also, I believe, reminded us that policy making is important, but it's also important not to over-regulate. You also talked about data-driven economy, and we definitely need to be mindful about ethical part of using the data. Last but not the least, you talked about technology governance, and maybe it's the right time to switch to our next presenter, Mr. Dr. Valery Virkovsky, who will be speaking about the digitalization of international supply chains, the trends and modern approaches. Dr. Valery Virkovsky is a conceiver of EU for Digital Alliance, is coordinator of EU for Digital E-Trade, E-Logistics Network in the Eastern Partnership. So, Dr. Virkovsky, please, the floor is yours.
Let's make sure my presentation is on. Yep. So I would like to thank you, the organizing committee of this conference, for inviting me to make, and I'll do my best to make a sensible contribution. And besides, I've got quite a challenge over here to cover the very complex topic in 15 minutes. That's why, with your permission, I will probably, to be precise in timing, read a couple of key statements from my slides. Actually, as far as digitalization is concerned, that's quite a buzzword, but to apply it to the supply chain, we would like to ask yourselves, what is supply chain digitalization? Yep, got it. So in the quite reliable sources, we could get the following definition. Supply chain digitalization is about the transformation of supply chain analog and paper-based processes, logistic processes, into the digital ones on the base or by establishing the dedicated master data that aggregates information across the entire international supply chain. Actually, some time ago, when we were developing the digitalization concept in the Eastern Partnership, we were facing a sort of a challenge trying to find the frontier between the traditional logistics and electronic logistics. And the people from the transport industry were quite jealous, saying, guys, look, guys, you are entering our space. And finally, we found out that the traditional logistics is handling the physical flows, cargo flows, and controlling and managing the processes on the S, while the e-logistics is dealing with the information and data generated by these physical flows in the transport corridors and supply chains. So if we define and understand the difference between these two components of the logistics process, we could identify, understand that the digitalization of logistic processes presents a powerful opportunity to transform international supply chains and provide the following core advantages. First of all, it's an opportunity for automation, which allows to speed up all the processes in buy, ship, pay cycle of international supply chain. So, and people who are dealing with this in the real life, they know that in this buy, ship, pay, buy is quite a well-automated, well-organized process, but ship is the most messy and difficult and unpredictable component of the whole cycle. That's why quite a lot of attention is paid to this component of the whole buy, ship, pay cycle. Then the second advantage is to keep supply chain participants cohesive and connected with, and this creates an opportunities for connectivity of disparate systems. You know that in the actual multi-modal logistic process, you've got the say, lorry transportation, railway transportation, sea transportation, air transportation, and all these modalities, they've got their own traditions, they've got their own documents, they've got their own regulations. And if somebody is requiring the whole multimodal transportation via supply chain, it's a real mess. And then somehow we need to harmonize the interests of all the participants involved and make them connected and harmonized in with the interests. And the third advantage is leveraging opportunity to leverage data for decision making, which allows us to gather and analyze massive amounts of information in order to use this data for facilitation of decision making process. Because those who are, say, either arranging or requesting the transcontinental transportation, they know how unpredictable the process could be, and whether because of any sort of problems in the physical infrastructure, the decision should be made immediately, which route to go, which means of transport to use. So if it's just the decision of the particular managers, it's quite a challenging task. So if we believe that digitalization could provide a sort of challenge opportunities, we could analyze the supply chain digitalization trends. Our group of experts have undertaken the analysis of the modern trends in the supply chain digitalization. And this analysis was conducted on the basis of the latest surveys of the big consultants like Gartner and the reports of the big four consultancy firms like McKinsey, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and IBM. In the result of this, in the result of analysis of these main trends, we identified for the digitalization the following, say, main areas of the development. So big consultants and big consultancy companies, they predicted that by 2026, large supply chain organizations will compete as a collaborative digital ecosystems rather than discrete firms. And that has got the particular reasons. So the next trend is that by 2024, supply chains will be redesigned for modularity with the digitalized business model innovations. Modularity means sort of core typical solutions which could be used as a Lego for crafting and composing the modern supply chains. And the second big trend is that by 2026, more than half of supply chain organizations will use artificial intelligence and machine learning to augment decision-making capabilities. It's related to the findings we mentioned in the opportunities section, but that's the that's an alignment. So I would like to say a couple of words about the supply chain digital ecosystems, because ecosystem is the very say fancy and buzzword as well, but in real life, digital ecosystem is a distributed, adaptive, and open socio-technical system with properties of self-organization, scalability, sustainability, and which is a very important part of this say arrangement ecosystem. It's that ecosystem should be built on harmonization principles related to the collaboration of all entities involved, because if it's the self-organizing and self-organizing system, there should be the harmonization of the interests of the participants. So as such, supply chain organizations are to share the data across the partner ecosystems between, because if you are, say, involving a lot of participants in the international supply chain, you need to provide the equal opportunities to share the data, to get an access, and to be involved in the actual process. And this important feature of the ecosystem should be provided on the basis of the technology platforms which have to integrate the technological systems of all partners involved. Let me say a couple of words about supply chain modularity. So modular operating models creates composability and breaking supply chain resources and processes into so-called building blocks of capabilities that can be quickly reused and reconfigured. That means that, for example, in the digitalization program of the European Union, there was the ideology of the building blocks of digital infrastructures. The European Union invested quite a lot of time and money into the defining the list of the building blocks, which could be reusable by all countries involved. And then they developed the co-solutions and made these co-solutions available for free to all the countries involved, just teaching them and assisting them to update and to get these building blocks tuned to the particular regulations of the particular country. So, and that was a proof that this building blocks strategy is very useful, time and money time and money effective. And supply chain modularity trends helps to standardize connections between the systems involved, and that's quite an important advantage in the multimodal environment. So, but by creating standardized autonomous building blocks for modularity, we enable common interfaces of digitalized supply chains, and that helps us to arrange the supply chains with the multimodal features. As far as the artificial intelligence and machine learning in supply chains, I would say that artificial intelligence and machine learning support the creation of autonomous supply chains, which will be able to automatically plan the logistic processes in real time and run automated operational actions. For example, if we would like to use the orthodox approach to the control and decision making in supply chains, we mainly will be using the sort of gut feeling and experience of the particular managers, but instead of that, that sort of decision-making process could be based on the fact and data based decision-making technologies. That's the trends, and that's the ideas of the big consultants which are watching what is happening on the market. But I would like to spend a couple of, show you a couple of slides proving that this sort of principles could be used in the real life for the real practical tasks which all the countries in the Eastern Partnership and all over the world is facing. For example, our group of experts has been developing the concept of the digital transport corridors since 2017, and this practical example is based on the creation of the federated ecosystem of platforms which integrates the resources of the participants of international transport corridors and enable us to create the data pipelines for multimodal cargo transportation and provide different business services for the government and businesses. In developing that sort of digital transport corridors, and this concept was accepted by the European Union and all Eastern Partnership countries, and on the base of that there were a couple of pilots already developed for the different groups of the Eastern Partnership countries. So using that sort of concept, we could enable more effective transit, control and monitoring of transcontinental cargo flows by the territories of the Eastern Partnership countries involved. Besides the concept, the group of experts developed the solution for that, because we found out that to implement the concept of federated ecosystem, it should be composed of the national multimodal e-logistics systems built on the co-integration platforms. Such solution has been developed, has been proved for the feasibility and implementability by the European Union expert community. So we're just now in a good shape and position to pilot the sort of concept and solutions in the Eastern Partnership countries. So there was another coincidence which is very important for the market of the Central Asian countries. In the current digital strategy, and there's the draft version of the report for the sort of digital strategy for current countries by 2030, there was a special e-logistics section. And this section and the conclusions of these sections appear to be very much in line with what we were developing in this partnership business community, expert community. For example, in the draft report, there are following main statement. Creating a regional hub for the transit of goods from Asia to Europe through the transformation of the logistic and transportation sectors could generate new jobs across the CAREC region and contribute to the sustainable growth. Second conclusion in the CAREC report was an integrated transit and transportation system could also serve as a tangible tool to enhance the cross-border transit potential and lead to free movement of goods and services in the European transcontinental corridors. So, and the third important one, the CAREC region can consider the development of cross-border logistic platforms to support the information exchange, underpinning cross-border and transnational supply chains. Those who were serving the cross-border transactions, they know that it's a real mess when the cargo is changing the, say, the jurisdiction. And in different countries, different regulations, different sometimes formats of the documents acceptable for the cargo flow. And in order to harmonize it, the only and most effective way is just to digitalize these processes. And besides these sort of two main components and the alignment of the decisions developed in the Eastern Partnership in the current report, our group of experts was analyzing the best practices, best international practices, which were presented in the report of the countries of the Pacific Ocean and Asian region. So there was a report in 2016 published with the UNESCAP recommendation how to build a sort of national systems, and there's a just general structure of that sort of system which demonstrates that all the participants of the supply chains could be linked by the national system, especially in the economies which are traditionally more or less centralized. And then if every country in the digital transport, in the transport corridors got the national logistics systems, they could be connected via the transnational platform into the single data pipeline or into the single trustful information environment. We went even deeper besides the conceptual solution or conceptual decision developed. By the experts of the logistic and digital transport corridor, the particular core functional structure was developed, and it was accepted by all Eastern Partnership countries and the European Union. And we are currently planning with the European Union for the new cycle of the Eastern Partnership program, the pilot implementations of that sort of solution in the particular countries. For example, there's a very practical opportunity for Azerbaijan to be involved in that, because in the latest summit of Eastern Partnership countries, there were two main statements in the conclusions into the decisions of the summit. First of all, European Union agreed or decided to have a focus more on the bilateral programs between the European Union and the particular Eastern Partnership countries on the basis of the strategic initiatives which every country could raise and could propose to the European Union. And the second important argument, that at the very end of the Eastern Partnership Summit protocol, there was a decision of the European Union to build and make operational 4 digital transport corridors in Eastern Partnership countries by 2025. And on the top of that, there was an interesting initiative proposed by the former Ministry of Transport, Communication, and High Technology, which in 2020 proposed the project initiative to digitalize the transport corridors of Guam countries. It's Georgia, in particular, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova. Later on, this pilot, because of the well-known difficulties in with Ukraine, this sort of concept was transformed into the digitalization solution for the Trans-Caspian corridor, and our group of experts developed that sort of solution, which is displayed on this particular slide. And that solution is focused on the corridor involving Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. So currently we are actively working with Kazakhstan partners, Azerbaijan partners, and Georgian partners. Hopefully Turkey, following the quite an important official statement of President Erdogan, which announced that they plan to build the huge international logistic hub in Turkey. So I do believe that all the sort of market trends will help Azerbaijan to play the very important role in that sort of initiative. And I do believe, and to conclude my speech, I strongly believe that digitalization of supply chain and transport corridors going through the Azerbaijan is considered to be a modern challenge and the real opportunity for your country.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Wirkovsky. And the digitalization of the supply chain is very important. And actually, COVID showed and proved that. This also reminds me about the Memorandum of Understanding that Azerbaijan was signed between the Republic of Azerbaijan and Republic of Turkey on digital trade. You also talked about the digital transport corridors. You talked about the modular operating models. You touched on the concept of digital carriage. And you also said that more than half of supply chain organizations will use AI in their processes. And actually, this would be a great time to pass the floor to our next presenter, our academician, Mr. Ali Abbasov, General Director of the Institute of Control Systems of Azerbaijan National Academy of Science. And he will be talking about the role of artificial intelligence in digital transformation and its prospects in the economy of Azerbaijan. Hörmətli Ali müəllim, buyurun, söz sizindir.
Sonda çıxış etmək çox çətindir. Çünki bugün bizim açılışımızda çox yaxşı mövzulara toxundu, çıxışlar oldu. Və demək olar ki, hökumət adamları, millət vəkilləri, alimlərin məşğul olduğu mövzulara toxundular, fikirlərini dedilər. Mən çalışaram, təkrar olmasın. Ona görə də mən slaydları çevirməyəcəm. İstəyərdim o məqamların üzərində dayanım ki, hansı ki, hər halda burada deyilməyib ola bilər. Bəlkə. Deməli, ölkəmizdə keçən il 21-ci ildə prezident fərmanı ilə rəqəmsal transformasiya konsepsiyasının hazırlanması, həmçinin burada qeyd olunduğu kimi Dördüncü Sənaye İnqilabının Təhlil və Koordinasiya Mərkəzi rəqəmsal süni intellekt strategiyasının yaranması üzərində işlər aparırlar. Lakin hər iki sənəd hələ hazır deyil, yəqin ki, yaxın zamanlarda olacaq. Amma süni intellektin inkişafı bütün ölkələrdə, daha doğrusu əksər ölkələrdə əsasən inkişaf etmiş və bir qrup inkişaf etməkdə olan ölkələrdə, o cümlədən Azərbaycanda da artıq inkişaf etməkdə və tətbiq olunmaqdadır. Amma bu ancaq başlanğıc mərhələdir. Biz lakin McKinsey Global Institute'un proqnozlarına baxsaq, 30-cu ilə qədər süni intellektin inkişafı 38% ilə kümülativ artımla təxminən 30-cu ilə 13 trilyon Amerika dolları həcmində global dünya məhsulunun artımına gətirəcəkdir. Düzdür, böyük rəqəmdir. Amma süni intellektin çox da yaxşı vədlərinə baxmayaraq onun problemləri də çoxdur. İndi ondan qısa dayanarıq. Azərbaycanda biz həm Milli Elmlər Akademiyasında, həmçinin İqtisad Universitetində və biz bir neçə modellər üzərində işləmişik. Amma hər halda bugün təşrif olunan model dövlət, özəl, akademik əməkdaşlıqdır. Bu, dünyada qəbul olunmuş o PPP yox, PPPAP. Bu əməkdaşlıq. Doğrudan da burada bu bir yeni innovasiya modeli kimi. Bu əsasən də keçmiş Sovet ölkələrinin inkişafı üçün daha da əlverişlidir və burada dövlətin yaratdığı şəraitlər, bu gün Azərbaycanda yüksək texnologiyalar parkları, xüsusi iqtisadi zonalar, həmçinin müəyyən istiqamətdə atılmış güzəştli şərtlər, o cümlədən özəl sektorun investisiya qabiliyyəti, kadr, daha doğrusu o seçim kadr hazırlığında kadr toplusu, tədqiqat institutlarının, universitetlərin isə onların ən çox böyük elmi kadrlar, elmi potensialı və əldə olunan nəticələrin, elmi nəticələrin praktikə tətbiqi kimi amillər onların bir yerə gətirilməsində yeni bir inkişafa şərait yaradır. Artıq ölkəmizdə buna başlanılmışdır və bunun nəticəsi olaraq elə süni intellektin inkişafı istiqamətə bir neçə addımlar atılmış. Məsələn, indi avtonom robotların köməyi ilə kənd təsərrüfatında, geodezi işlərdə müəyyən işlər aparılır. O süni intellektin köməyi ilə şəkil tanımaları, tətbiqi ilə bir çox məsələlər həll olunur, amma bu başlanğıcdır. İndi burada bir məqamat oxumaq istəyirəm. Adətən yeni texnologiyaların tətbiqi həmişə olduğu kimi inkişaf etmiş ölkələrdən gəlir. Bizdə də elə məqamlar indi süni intellektin istiqamətində var. Amma elə momentlər var ki, onlar artıq hazır gəlmir. Məsələn, süni intellektin bugün təbii dilin emalı sistemləri. O təbii dilin emalı sistemləri adətən dil üzərində qurulan sistemlərdir. İngilis, Rus, Fransız dilləri üçün bu çox yaxşı sistemlər var. Lakin Azərbaycan dili çox da yayılmadığı üçün, o qədər də kommersiya tərəfdən maraqlı görünmədiyi üçün xaricdə bu istiqamətdə demək olar ki, bir iş görülmür. Və bunu isə Azərbaycanda artıq 20 ildir bunun üzərində işlər gedir və son zamanlar əldə olunmuş nəticələr var və burada Azərbaycan dilinin maşın öyrənmə, neyron şəbəkələrin tətbiqi ilə bir neçə artıq tətbiqlər var. Bunların içərisində təhsildə, sonra tibbdə, başqa sahələrdə az da olsa, amma rəqəmsal xidmətlərin göstərilməsində bu doğrudan da çox böyük addım atılmış kimi saymaq olar. Bu gün Azərbaycan dilində robot operator kimi sistem işlənib hazırlanmışdır. Hansı ki, çağrı mərkəzlərində o avtomatlaşmaya artıq eksperimental olaraq başlanılmışdır. Hər halda biz bir misal gətirsək, məsələn, 20-ci ildə İqtisadiyyat Nazirliyinin çağırış mərkəzində 1 milyondan çox telefon zəngi müraciət olmuşdur. Əgər bunu daha da geniş götürsək, olduqca sayı çoxdur. Bu gün biz həmişə görürük ki, vətəndaşların müraciətidir. Bunlara hamısına artıq xidmət eləmək mümkün deyil. Amma dilin başa düşülməsi, Azərbaycan nitqinin başa düşülməsi və onun əsasında ona avtomatik cavab verilməsi robot operatorlar tərəfindən eyni vaxtda yüzlərlə, minlərlə cavablandırır. Və müəyyən xüsusiyyətlər var ki, o daha da effektiv olur. Bundan sonra hər halda biz qeyd etdik ki, o dronlar vasitəsilə müəyyən işlərin həyata keçirilməsində keçən 20-ci ildə 49 günlük müharibə ərzində bu pilotsuz uçuş aparatlarının xüsusi təyinatlı məqsədlərlə təqdim olunması, bunlar artıq bu elementlər var. Amma burada bir dənə qorxuducu, narahat edici odur ki, bu sistemlər get-gedə avtonomlaşır və avtonomlaşda artıq özlərini sərbəst idarə edirlər. Buradan çıxan bəzi problemlər var ki, onların üzərində iş aparılmalıdır. Yəqin ki, yenə qeyd etdiyim ki, bu əməkdaşlıq tərkibində aparırlar. Bizim apardığımız tədqiqatlar bir şeyə diqqət cəlb edir həmçinin də. Bu gün rəqəmsal iqtisadiyyatdan danışır, iqtisadiyyatın transformasiyası. Amma digər iqtisadi istiqamətlərdə olan kimi, bunun da öz təbii resursu var. Məsələn, aqrar iqtisadiyyatda meşə, su, dəniz, bunlar torpaq, onun təbii resurslarıdır. Sənaye iqtisadiyyatında karbohidrogen ehtiyatları, metal filizləri, neft, qaz, sənaye iqtisadiyyatının əsas təbii resursudur. Rəqəmsal iqtisadiyyat, bilik iqtisadiyyatında isə yeni təbii resurs meydana gəlir ki, o da informasiyadır. İnformasiyalar toplusudur ki, bunun əsasında biz süni intellektin tətbiqi ilə yeni biliklər qazanırıq və yeni bizi narahat edən problemləri yeni metodlarla biz həll edirik. Bu gün informasiyanın, rəqəmləşən informasiyanın illik artımı təxminən 60%'dir. Artıq informasiya toplusu elə bir vəziyyətə gəlib ki, idarə olunmayan bir vəziyyətə gəlib. Elə Cenevada o böyük hadron kollayderi hər saniyədə 40 terabayt informasiya verir. Bunu yığıb yığışdırmaq mümkün deyil. Azərbaycanın məsələn yer səthini müşahidə etmək ki, hər gün 60 milyon kvadrat kilometr ərazidən keçərək müəyyən şəkillər çəkir. Biz bu informasiyanın 1000-dən 10 mindən birini yığsaq, böyük informasiyadır. Hətta deyirik ki, bu gün biz demirik, elə dünyada deyil, hər bir inək bu gün ildə 200 megabayt informasiya generasiya edir. Ona görə bu informasiyanın yığılıb, toplanması, idarə edilməsi bu gün rəqəmsal iqtisadiyyat, gələcək iqtisadiyyat üçün çox bir vacib məqamdır. Azərbaycanda da bu işlər yedir. Azərbaycan bu gün doğrudan da böyük data mərkəzlərinə, o böyük güclü o high performance computer mərkəzi, ondan sonra böyük hublara, mən adlarını saysam çox vaxt gətirər və transmilli o fibrooptik güclü kanallara malikdir ki, bu kanalların, bunların hamısının köməyi ilə informasiyanı toplamaq, onları emal etmək mümkündür. Doğrudan da bugün Azərbaycanda rəqəmsal klaster yaranmışdır artıq. O cümlədən həmçinin bu informasiyanı emal edən böyük bir alimlər qrupu yaranmışdır. Biz bu istiqamətdə bir layihə bir cümlə ilə deyim. Məsələn, Böyük İpək yolunda bugün rəqəmsal kəmər və yol layihəsində Çin Elmlər Akademiyası, Çin Milli Aerokosmik Cəmiyyəti ilə, agentliyi ilə birlikdə yer kürəsində bu problemlərin həlli üçün, yəni bu dayanıqlı SDG, dayanıqlı məqsədlər, inkişaf məqsədlərinin də olan problemləri, yerdə iqlim problemi, təbii fəlakətlər, su problemləri, qida, bunların həlli üçün ancaq bir məsələ, bütün insanlar, bütün alimlər bir yerə toplaşmalıdır. Onların üçün isə əsas verilənlər orada olan, yığılan informasiyadır. Azərbaycan bugün bu istiqamətdə böyük aerokosmik vasitələr vasitəsilə informasiya toplusu, böyük data mərkəzləri, qeyd etdiyimiz kanallar hamısı imkan verir ki, bu layihədə çox fəal iştirak eləsin ki, biz də elə bir təqdimat vermişik, Çinlilərlə bir yerdə işləyirik. Burada son sözü isə alimlərin süni intellektin əsasən onun metodlarına istifadə edərək yığılan informasiyanın toplanması və problemlərin həllidir. Son 2-3 dəfə mən qayıtmışam bu sözə, amma indi belə yoşunlaşdırmaq istəyirəm. Hər halda süni intellektin bugün stratejiya üzərində də işlənilir. Dünyada ən böyük problemi onun o intellekt problemidir. Bunun tənzimləmə məsələləri problemdir. Təhlükəsizlik məsələləri. Bugün Avropa ilə Amerika arasında biraz hələ var. Amerika tərəfdə hər halda deyilir ki, avtonom intellektlərə malik olan avtomat aparatlar, robotlar, dronlar olmalıdır. Amma təsəvvür edin ki, avtonom özü-özünə qərar qəbul edən avtonom dron hara hücum edib, kimi nə edəcəyi məlum deyil. Elon Musk'ın sürücüsüz avtomobili. Avtomobil kimisə vursa bilinmir, o günahkar kimdir. Onu istehsal edən, onu dizayn edən yaxud kim? Çünki indi süni intellektin əsl odur ki, o özü-özünə qərar qəbul edir. Və onun qərarını qəbul etməsini biz əvvəlcədən proqnozlaşdıra bilmirik. Bugün ən böyük çətin məsələlərin həllində, riyazi məsələlərin həllində bəlkə də insan otursa 100.000 ilə o superkompüterin gördüyü işi görüb həmin nəticə gələ bilər. Amma süni intellekt sistemlərində, o qərar qəbul etmələrində əsl özü-özünə öyrənib insandan ağıllı vəziyyətə gələndə bu mümkün deyil. Buradan belə çıxır ki, əgər bu aparatlar bizdən ağıllı, insandan ağıllı olsa, indi Isaac Asimov'un, Stanislav Lem, Clark, bunların da necə deyiblərsə elə də olar. Sonradan biz təhlükəli bir vəziyyətə düşə bilərik. Ona görə tənzimləmə məsələləri bugün dünyada bir nömrəli məsələlərdir. O cümlədən burada qeyd olundu ki, Azərbaycanda da tənzimləməsi baxılacaq. Mən fürsətdən istifadə edirəm, bizim parlamentimizin İqtisadiyyat Sənaye Komitəsinin sədri buradadır. Onlar yəqin ki, gələcəkdə artıq indidən rəqəmsal iqtisadiyyatın tənzimləmə məsələlərinə, qanunlarına baxırlar. Bunu da nəzərə almaq Tahir mənim çox yaxşı olardı. Adam çox danışmaq istəyir, amma vaxtımız məhduddur. Mən elə gəl keçmədim vaxtı, yox? Yaxşı. Mən sizə çox minnətdaram. Diqqətinizə görə çox sağ olun. Çox sağ olun. Sağ olun.
Təşəkkür edirik Əli müəllim. Çox vacib məqamlara və məsələlərə toxundunuz. Dövlət, özəl sektor, elm və təhsil müəssisələri arasında, sənaye arasında vəhdət çox vacibdir. Bu əlaqə qurulmalıdır. Eyni zamanda süni intellekt üzrə milli strategiyanın hazırlanmasının əhəmiyyəti də yəqin ki, bir daha qabarıq şəkildə ortaya qoyulmuş oldu. Burada bir çox problemlərə toxunacaq həmən strategiya və o qeyd etdiyiniz süni intellektlə bağlı etik məsələlərin də həmən strategiyada etik məsələlərə də toxunulması nəzərdə tutulur. Bununla yanaşı böyük verilənlərin süni intellekt vasitəsilə emalı və analiz edilməsi data əsaslı rəqəmsal iqtisadiyyatın qurulmasında olduqca vacibdir. Və bu istiqamətdə də əminəm ki, işlər görüləcək. Bununla belə bizim bugünkü gündə keçirdiyimiz tədbir, ölkədə Rəqəmsal İnkişaf və Nəqliyyat Nazirliyinin yaradılması, Dördüncü Sənaye İnqilabının Təhlili və Koordinasiya Mərkəzinin İqtisadiyyat Nazirliyinin nəzdində yaradılması, ümumiyyətlə bu sahə barəsində çox geniş və dəfələrlə həm tədbirlərin, həm mövzuların açılması, inanıram ki, Azərbaycanda rəqəmsallaşmanın, Dördüncü Sənaye İnqilabı texnologiyalarının tətbiqi üçün çox gözəl bir zəmin yaradıb və biz ən yaxın illərdə bunun töhfəsini görmüş ola biləcəyik. Region ölkələrinin arasında lidera çevrilmiş ola biləcəyik. Bu pozitiv nöqtədə yəqin ki, panelimizin sona gəldiyini elan etmək istəyirəm. Sadəcə bizim panelistlərə xırda belə hədiyyələr təqdim olunmalıdır. Xahiş edirəm bu təqdim etməni də həyata keçirək və yəqin ki, tədbirimizi bağlı elan etmiş olacağıq. Təşəkkürlər.
Saat 10'da bölmə iclasları ilə davam etdirəcək. Çox sağ olun, bir daha təşəkkür edirik. Sağ olun.